We've got a really good show for you tonight, everybody. We have a special guest, but before I introduce him, I did a little bit of research pre-show because it's very interesting. The 48th Ward election for the new alderperson is full of 10 candidates. I want to quote from MSNBC what they shared MSN in this article below. Let's see if I can get to the point where they're talking about the 48th Ward. Where is it? Why can't I? Oh, here we are. We have to continue reading. That's what it is. All right. So here we go. Wait, you know what? Why don't I let me see if I can quote it from our show notes, because I know that I have it in there also for anybody who hasn't looked at the show notes. And bear with me because I'm going somewhere with this. Let's see here. Google Notes, Google Show Notes. Here we go. So as far as the 48th Ward race goes, the 48th Ward race to succeed retiring Alderman Harry Osterman is even more crowded, with 10 candidates who have filed to run. Joe Dunn, Isaac Freilich-Jones, Andre Peliquin, Lenny Mana Hoppenworth, Brian Hogg, Nick Ward, Larry Svebeck, Nasir Faulkner, Roxanne Volkman, and Andy Peters all submitted petitions. Now, I went to the websites of all 10 candidates. I saw a recurring theme on a lot of these candidates as far as the issues. Dunn's website, improve public safety, keep our ward affordable, neighborhood schools. Isaac's website, I'm running for alderman to fight for the 48th Ward where housing is affordable, government is accountable, schools are funded, and communities are safe. There's a theme there. Andre, who has a background in real estate, which concerns me about gentrification, but we don't know yet. His big issues are housing, seniors, safety, services, schools, immigration, healthcare, small business, LGBTQ. Hannah Hoppenworth. Her website, front page, she's a queer woman of color, small business owner, daughter of Filipino immigrant, safety, housing, and health, and human rights. Not too thrilled with the identity politics that lead that, but all right, it seems like her heart's in the right place. Hogg, safety for our ward in the city, public schools, affordable housing, pro-union, pro-bodily autonomy. Larry Svebeck, progressive problem solver, diversity, entrepreneurial and fun-loving, safety and health, housing, affordability, protecting our environment and renovating our infrastructure, supporting LGBTQ plus community and women, strengthening our local economy, providing a high-quality education for every child. I give Svebeck some credit because he did go into some details. Faulkner, there's nothing on his website but a bio. Volkman, she doesn't have a website either, just Twitter. She's a federal government expert on housing and fair wages, daughter of a UAW member, Gen Xer, working mom who gets it done. No platform, aside from a couple of buzzwords that we've heard from a lot of the other candidates. Peters has no website. Now, our guest tonight, Alderman Nick Ward, he has a website. Not only does he have a website, he has a whole long page listing his priorities. And let me share some of them, because he does go into a lot of detail. Specific detail regarding a lot of issues we talk about here on Chicago Corner a lot. Support the Chicago's Teachers Union and all union school workers on their fights for fair contracts. Support the removal of police from our police institutions and replace them with social workers, that the Chicago Teachers Union fight for COVID safety plans that prioritize proper ventilation, cleaning procedures, vaccination drives, testing and personal protective equipment so that the schools are safe for in-person learning and that the likelihood of clustered outbreaks is drastically diminished. Support the Just Cause Eviction Ordinance, which would strengthen protections for renters and require landlords to pay relocation assistance when evicting tenants without just cause. Strengthen legislation that preserves housing for low-income renters and provide permanent, affordable housing for people experiencing homelessness, which we talk about, every broadcast. Build affordable multi-bedroom housing for families to help combat enrollment loss in local CPS schools, close the housing gap, and prevent families from leaving the city altogether. Environmental justice, support democratizing ComEd and all of our utilities so that critical services are guaranteed for all residents and aid our transition to net zero emissions. Now, I'm about to introduce our guest and then my co-hosts for the evening, but Mr. Ward, do you watch our show to hear that we're talking about all this stuff all the time?
I love this. I'll be honest. This is the first time I have seen the show, but this is wonderful, and I think that you're talking about the issues that I talk about every day, and I really appreciate that. Also, as I referenced before, my cat's playing a little bit of tomfoolery with the the camera here. But hey, just a quick point of clarification. You did call me the alderman of the 48th ward.
Hopefully you will be. I can't vote in the 40th because I'm in the 50th, but
I would be honored to come back here, next April 6th as the alderman. But just want to clarify that we are still
in my excitement introducing you, I overstepped or misspoke. Although I have to say, having read how you have been very, very specific about identifying your priorities as opposed to all those other websites. And really, when I saw that this race was full of 10 other candidates, I'm like, whoa, what do they stand for? So we can hear what you stand for. And I did an honest assessment of all the websites. As I mentioned, I wasn't too thrilled that like identity politics seemed to be at the front end of one candidate's website. And a lot of the same buzzwords regarding public safety, keep our ward affordable, neighborhood schools, blah, 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 without any real detail on how they want to support those initiatives. So before we continue, Nick, I do want to also welcome to the show my co-host for the evening, Mr. Kit Cabello of Hardlens Media. Kit,
cheers and salutations. I've been looking forward for this city election cycle. I am hoping that finally we get people that will fight for this city and help out the constituents that live here. Despite all that you see on corporate media, Chicago is filled with good people. And this city is worthwhile to defend and build up. We just got to really turn out for 2023.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Kit.
No problem.
Absolutely. And our venerable Mr. Edward Heller.
How's it going? I look forward to hearing your opinions on Chicago pizza.
Oh, boy.
I wasn't prepped for this.
That's okay. We'll be gentle.
You better make the correct answer and say Chicago is the correct pizza. So there you go.
Edward is our pizza aficionado here, and a damn good cook and pizza chef.
I do my part.
So, Mr. Ward, let's kind of get into it. As you know, this is a pretty laid back, casual talk show. We can be irreverent, but as I mentioned in the pre-show, we're always respectful when we have guests on. We get a little bit jokey though sometimes, so please forgive our irreverence if that comes up. But to start with, one of my main questions I thought was that with 10 people jumping in the race because Harry Osterman is not running again, would you have decided to enter this race had Osterman not announced that he was not running for re-election? And if so, what were some of Alderperson Osterman's, weaknesses that you felt weren't serving the community that you wanted to step up and address?
Yeah, I was running against Harry Osterman. I announced my candidacy online. We kicked off on January 25th, I think, of this year, and we had an in-person launch event at Rewired Cafe in February. So I was running to go up against Harry Osterman, and I felt really, really excited about the possibility. We built this platform that you referenced. I built it with the whole team. So I work with an organization called the 48th Ward Neighbors for Justice that also works with other organizations around the city. And so the platform was built, with CTU members in mind, with the Edgewater Environmental Coalition members. It was built with folks from United Working Families who are working on climate justice action all of the time. And so that's what I'm really proud that you honored that, because for me, I built it in a group of people. Wasn't just me scribbling down my thoughts, though there was certainly a lot of that. And then I had my campaign manager say, this is way too long and you got to be a lot more specific. But the main reason that I felt strong about running against a 3-term incumbent who's has a beach named after him in the 48th Ward is I did a lot of work here, particularly around mutual aid right at the height of the pandemic. And so I saw the real need of working families in the community, of seniors in the community. I got groceries and resources to people all of the time, and especially during the height of 2020. And I really noticed how there was so much more need than a ragtag group of volunteers could really meet, and I thought, well, what could we do if we had, the quite frankly, the power and the visibility of the ward office, because I wasn't seeing it coming out of that office. And I thought that was a real moment for me. And there are other sources of disagreement that I had with Alderman Harry Osterman, some of which I was very public about. I didn't think he was very supportive of unionized employees. I was there when the Starbucks workers won their union election on Broadway in Catalpa, and I was the only political candidate or politician from the 48th Ward who was there to celebrate and support them. And then, if I may, there's a story that I like to share.
Please.
And it's minor in the scope of things, but it's meaningful to me. So I'm on the local school council at Gowdy Elementary School. I'm a community representative. And when the kids were coming back after being out of school due to COVID, the school had 1.5 janitorial positions available. So it had one full-time janitor and then a part-time janitor that was allocated, but it wasn't being filled. And these are union positions. These are SEIU 73 union jobs. And the principal had called CPS. They had tried to get in touch with the Board of Election. They had tried to call the alderman, and they weren't getting anywhere just to get a part-time janitor to help make sure that the school was clean and safe for kids to come back to. And so I worked and partnered with the 48th Ward Neighbors for Justice independent political organization, and we spent 2 days organizing a phone zap and just called Harry Osterman every 10 minutes to get him to pick up the phone. And he did, finally, and by the beginning of next week, Gowdy had a part-time janitor. And I thought to myself, wow, if it's that easy just to pick up the phone, what can we do if there's somebody in that seat who is proactive and working on behalf of, working class families all the time?
More receptive.
Or receptive. And
more receptive.
Yeah, more receptive. And it wasn't me saying, I want to do this. It was me saying, what if we had this, a person in this role who had these kinds of proactive values?
So a lot of your platform and your candidacy is very dependent on input from 48th Ward residents, neighbors in that ward. Can you tell us a little bit about your background before you decided to jump into this race? What your experience is that you feel also helps position you as a strong candidate? I mean, look, I was very, very impressed again with everything you share here with your priorities. But let's talk a little bit about your experience and how that plays into actually being able to accomplish a lot of what you have identified as your priorities for the ward.
Yeah, so I moved to Chicago in 2004. I'm from Michigan originally. My parents were public school teachers. I went to theater school in Ohio, and so, like a lot of Midwest theater graduates, I came to Chicago to participate in the the vibrant theater scene here. So 2004, I landed, and I got immediately activated in the storefront community, but not really. I actually ended up not doing much acting. I wasn't very good at it, to be frank with you, and it wasn't really where I was being called. So I did a lot of production management with storefront theaters. I linked up with a storytelling organization called Second Story, where I am still a company member as a storyteller, educator, and kind of producer, curator type. So I've produced a lot of events with a lot of different people in many different spaces around Chicago. So bars.
It's logistics. I can share also as a producer director. What we do is all about logistics. So clearly, as long as you have that organizational foundation, you're basically taking that organizational experience and shifting it to public service and civic action.
That's exactly right. And you kind of put the words in my mouth, so I won't repeat what you just said. But like many folks who do that work, I was under and more often than that unpaid, and so I supplemented my income waiting tables. So I worked as a waiter for 20 years. I started working in restaurants when I was 17, and really it was in Chicago where I saw a lot of the real disparities built into that economic system in the restaurant industry. Working alongside bussers and food runners who worked multiple jobs, often in different parts of the city, and relied, like I did, on public transportation to get them everywhere that could be quasi-reliable. And worrying about making enough tips every night for my own rent and bills and groceries. And then I spent 4 years just recently at an organization called Young Chicago Authors, where and I should say, if for those who don't know YCA, the organization teaches hip hop and spoken word to young people all across Chicago. And so I had colleagues who would come up through the programs as youth, and said, like, this program saved my life. And I met, young folks who are in the programs currently talking about what it meant to them. And also just seeing them just on fire with really having, a space where they could be themselves and they could be with other people just like them, like people who wanted to spend all day writing poems at 17, 18 years old. And so I saw kind of the need for that container for young folks. I
interject here. You have no political experience.
That's right.
That might not be a liability.
Yeah,
let's get people in there who are like connected with the community, who are actually understand the struggles of what people are going through, instead of the same rotation of small business owner, real estate person. Those are going to be very, very important issues facing anybody who wins that seat in that ward. Supporting local business and supporting safety and stuff, but the issues that impact so many people that don't have a roof over their head or can't afford, or there is no affordable housing for, or they're not getting fair wages in these small businesses or large businesses.
Yeah.
You have a connection with understanding what those challenges and struggles are, as opposed from, some candidates who might be disconnected because they haven't dealt with the same kind of issues.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that, the level, like I rented, and I'm still a renter. And because of that, I bounced around in so many different neighborhoods, right? Just trying to find a place where I could call home. And I think that's what everybody wants. We all want that experience. We all want a place where we can feel loved and taken care of. And that's what I found here in the 48th Ward. But also I think that what really prepares me for this role from that political perspective that you mentioned is getting involved with local organizations who are doing political work. So it's yes, my background is as a theater artist and a waiter, primarily, but also it's being on so many Zoom calls talking about policy. It's being on so many calls talking about, hey, this strike is happening. Can we organize support for these workers because they really need it? Who can come during these shifts? That stuff, like I am activated in that very direct way, which is exciting.
I would also opine here that performing is all about collaboration. And if you can take that sense of collaboration into civic action and actually listen to the people in your community and advocate for them, and not just special interests or some of the other crony alder people, that's a good thing. I don't want to bogart the conversation here. I know that Kit and Ed will probably have some questions, but I do want to really quickly add before I turn it over to some of what they want to ask, is that some of the big issues that we always talk about here are police reform, homelessness, and gentrification, as it really does seem to affect a lot of communities all across the city, gentrification, especially in the north side. So those might be some topics we want to kind of get a little bit deeper into, but Kit, what would you like to ask Nick here?
All right. Obviously, Chicago is suffering from a lot of political issues due to the negligence of a system that is designed to only cater to large real estate developers, the politically connected, and so much more. So One thing in particular that I am passionate about is stopping environmental racism and protecting our communities. Now, the city of Chicago has lead in its drinking water. It just isn't a South Side or West Side issue. It's a North Side issue. It's a Chicagoan issue. And the two previous mayoral administrations, Mayor Rahm Emanuel and Mayor Lori Lightfoot, have done little to nothing to really address it. Plus, on top of that, we have other dangerous contaminants impacting our drinking water supply. Plus, there's also environmental racism happening on the south and west side neighborhoods of Chicago. So, as a potential alderman, do you have a chance of actually winning this election? And should you win this seat, what are you prepared to do to really deal with the ongoing environmental racism that is impacting Chicago? And while these areas may not be in your ward, what impacts one part of Chicago, well, it's going to impact every single part of it. It's going to be right there. So what are you prepared to do? Because there are a lot of political elite, the establishment, the connected, that will do everything they can to keep business as usual. What are you prepared to do to really challenge the status quo and, well, protect the people of Chicago from this clear threat to our environment?
Can I also add, Ed, I'm sorry, Kit, in your question of Nick here, what are you prepared to do about it? You're channeling Sean Connery from The Untouchables.
Yeah,
what are you prepared to do about it?
Well, then make me the bad guy. Make me the bad
No,
guy.
it's not a bad thing. No. I'm glad. It reminded me that's a very demanding statement, but it's a very important one. Absolutely, we do have to ask all of our candidates, what are you prepared to do in light of so much of the cronyism and the major leaders, the mayors, turning a blind eye, and unfortunately a lot of lapdog alder people just turning a blind eye to it. Although I do think some of the alder people in those specifically affected wards have been trying to do stuff, but they've also got the state the state EPA, not the federal EPA, that's come in to try to do some things to who we feel have been like basically aiding and abetting the environmental polluters.
Yeah. I mean, I want to, just because it's more fun than talking about environmental racism up front, the Untouchables reference I really appreciate. And a new kind of Chicago way, though, if we're being honest, right? And I think that's what we're really after here in the next election cycle. And I want to say too, Kit, your point about, people of the 48th ward also being directly connected to folks on the south and the southwest side is so prescient for me. I think I want to end the provincialism of aldermanic seats, or I don't even know if I'm using provincialism correct in this way, but oftentimes an alderperson will say, well, the only thing I'm doing is for the residents of the 48th ward. But the residents of the 48th ward interact with workers who come here every single day. Workers who work at 7-Eleven, at our coffee shops, at our restaurants, who work in the one of 9 or so theaters that are here in Chicago, or here in the 48th ward, that I really love. So actually the way that Chicago works is people moving all throughout the city, and they need the resources of a proactive alderperson to really make sure that we're all getting what we need. We need to end the practice of sacrifice zones. I mean, full stop. That's the biggest thing that's happening, I think.
I was thinking prior to the broadcast, because as I mentioned, I can't vote for you, but from what I'm hearing, I would. Wouldn't it be great if every citizen in the city of Chicago could vote, or had a responsibility to vote for alder people in every ward, to hopefully break that provincial mindset, in the understanding that if everybody's voting for the alder people that they think really have the public's best interests in mind, that's a way to break up the tribalism that seems to dominate so much of what happens in city council.
Yeah. And so since we can't do that right now, what I'm really excited about is the opportunities that I've had to build coalition with other candidates who are running in similar positions around Chicago right now. And so I'm really, this is why Angela Clay, who's running in the 46th ward, and I have a great relationship, that we're building a great political relationship, because her ward is directly south of my ward, and what happens in the 46th, particularly related to housing and gentrification, is happening in the 48th. But it's not just the north side. So a couple of nights ago, I had a had a fundraiser and was really honored and proud that Julia Ramirez was running in the 12th ward out on the southwest side, joined and spoke about, the struggles of her community and the ways in which that the 48th and the 12th ward and the 26th and the 6th, can all work together, because that's what we have to do. We have to get a city council that actually works together, and we do that through solidarity, which, you talked about buzzwords before. That's a buzzword that a lot of folks use, but I really believe that if we're really establishing and understanding our interlocking relationship, we have to have solidarity together. So that's yeah.
You do mention on your website under environmental justice that you believe in environmental racism as a citywide problem that requires a citywide solution.
Yeah.
We can combat environmental injustice by canceling contracts with polluters, investing in climate resilient and carbon neutral infrastructure, and refusing to give public space to corporations. Now, one of the points on your environmental justice priority platform is to reopen the Chicago Department of the Environment. How would what does I didn't realize we had a Department of the Environment. I didn't realize it was closed. What will reopening do to help support your platform on environmental justice and these problems of environmental racism that affect the entire city?
So a little bit of history there. The previous Department of the Environment was a grant-funded program. I think it was a federal grant. I could be wrong about that. Y'all should fact check me at some point. But it was a grant-funded program that the grant money ran out during Rahm Emanuel's administration. There have been calls from alder people for the last 4 years to reopen the Department of the Environment. One of the folks leading that call is 47th Ward Alderman Matt Martin. The ask from the environmental justice organizations, the various PACs and community organizations, is a $10 million funding for an environmental justice program. What that would do is create a dedicated city program that works with all of the other departments to establish the interlocking policy proposals, right? Because we know that climate resiliency has to run through housing, has to run through the Department of Transportation, it has to run through workforce development. We want green union jobs, right? And so that what's happening now is that in the current budget, the one that was just passed, Mayor Lightfoot established an office of the environment, funded at about $700,000.
Jesus Christ, $700,000.
The scale
oh my God,
something. It really is. It really is something. And an office that's under the mayor's office can leave if there's another mayor next.
She's got TIF funds she can open up, Nick. That's the thing. She's got TIF funds she can open up, and if she's relying just on federal grant funding, then obviously it's not a priority to her.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right. And so that's what that department would do and what it would establish. And we've seen other departments utilize their powers as city departments. And I think that that's what the Department of the Environment would do. And that's why I support it and why I'm excited about, again, continuing to work with the next group of 15 plus new alder people next year to really fight for that climate resiliency that will benefit all of us.
So have you formed alliances with some of the other challengers in other wards that you recognize share the same platform that you do with a lot of the priorities you put on your website?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Angela Clay. I'm also a DSA endorsed alder person, and so really have that alliance with the other DSA challengers. Oscar Sanchez in the 10th ward and Luis Buani in the 50th are the others who are the challengers, and I think that gives us an opportunity. Actually, I would be remiss if I didn't shout out Denali Dasgupta, who's running against Samantha Nugent next year as well, and is the only challenger in that race. And so we end up sort of being at the same events all of the time, and that gives us a real opportunity to just have regular check-ins and just say, like, how are things going? What are you hearing on the doors? How are you feeling about, your fundraising, your field game? What is the possibility of getting us all to the finish line and beyond and elected? Because we're, even if we're collegially building these roles, our policies are all really interlocking, and we learn
alignment.
and in alignment. Yeah.
Kit, did you have a follow-up? Because I think I just felt that like the whole concept of the Department of Chicago reopening the Chicago Department of the Environment
Mhm.
and Nick's extrapolating on that kind of spoke to some of the issues that we're talking about. But go ahead.
Well, okay, so I'll keep this at this will probably be out of your ability as an alderman, but you should be made aware of it. So sometime in October, myself and a few of my colleagues from Hard Lens Media, we did a follow-up to a documentary that we did in 2018, and it has to deal with the environmental pollution that's happening in Indiana. And see, Lake Michigan obviously is connected to Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, et cetera, state of Michigan. And in Indiana, for example, there is a very big hands-off approach to the large industrial corporations that are there. And what they do is like dilution is the solution. They have toxic waste and other dangerous materials, dilute it with water, put it into Lake Michigan. And let's face it, Chicagoans, we have access to Lake Michigan as well. So as an alderman, if you were to potentially reopen that administration, would you use that position to maybe potentially reach out to the state of Illinois and other branches of our government, be it at the federal level, to perhaps do something about the reckless pollution that's happening across our state? Now, obviously, you are an alderman. There are limits to your power.
I was going to say,
that is true.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we can get everyone at least raising the alarm, and even if that's at the aldermanic level, that makes noise for the state to make noise, and eventually for it to get to the ears in Washington D.C. What would you be able to do? Are you aware of what's happening across our state?
I really I appreciate this because I think that yes, there are limits to power, but there is power, and power has to be utilized. And part of the power is the visibility of that office, you know. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the small story that I told about the part-time janitor at Gowdy. You know, the CPS is not in direct relationship with the city of Chicago and the city council, but just having the power and the relationships to make that phone call, right? It's about building those relationships. So it's working with our the ILGA folks who are in the 48th Ward, which for me is Kelly Cassidy, Mike Simmons, and newly elected Representative Han Wynn, but also Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, right? It's making sure that we have a good relationship and building a relationship and making sure that we understand, hey, these issues that you know require federal allocation affect people at Broadway and Thorndale every single day, in the same way that they're also going to affect people, you know, on 47th Street or 71st Street, you know. And so I think using the power of the office is really important and something that I'm really engaged in.
I want to get Ed involved in the conversation also. Thanks for being patient, Ed. Is there anything that related to what we've talked about so far that you have some thoughts or questions about?
Questions, no. But I mean, I was looking just to get an idea of like what the 48th Ward looked like, because we in past shows we've talked about how the ward maps got redrawn and all this other stuff that went on, and I'm like, what does the 48th Ward look like? And I'm like, I pull up a map, I type Chicago 48th Ward, and I get, hold on, I get this.
Oh,
this is my result.
Also hilarious that I'm the second result there.
You're the only other result. I mean, this
not a bad thing. I mean, like Jamal winning the lottery to be number one on the ballot for mayor. Destiny works in funny ways.
Yeah.
So I mean, this basically, what this tells me is that whoever's helping you out with your campaign knows that people are going to Google 48th Ward and try to figure out what's going on there, and you're the only other name that pops up. That's brilliant.
Thanks. Yeah, I cannot say enough about the team who built this campaign. And like from building the website to my campaign manager, who I've been with since September of last year, to the new field director we just brought on, to the volunteers who staff the office, writing postcards, texting, making phone calls. It really is a people-powered effort. But to answer your actual question about the ward boundaries, so It's a pretty rectangular ward. The topmost boundary is Devon, just on the south side of Loyola, basically. So the kind of main Loyola campus is in the 49th ward, so Devon, and then the lakefront. And then down on the lakefront towards, it stops at Ainsley. Yeah, here we go. The residential part stops at Ainsley. The road and parks go down to Lawrence. And then if you scroll down a little bit to the bottom, keep scrolling. So it's not on this map, but if you see where Ainsley at the very bottom left, where it juts out there, yeah, right there. There's a new block that goes from Ainsley 1 block over to Magnolia, 1 block up to Argyle, and back to Broadway, and that encompasses Fiorama restaurant, a new ramen spot, a row of adorable single family homes, Pizzazzian library, and a car wash. And so that's the new boundary, and then it goes over to Clark Street and Andersonville. So kind of bisects Clark Street between the 48th and the 40th.
Okay, and let me bring up the other brilliant thing is that your office is right next door to a Thai restaurant.
Oh, the best.
I
I will tell them you said that.
How often are you guys ordering from there?
That's one of the hard-hitting questions we bring to people here on Chicago Corner.
Yeah, I mean, at least once, if not twice a week, and we love them. They take such good care of us. We'll order a mess of food when we have big volunteer days. But I can't say enough about Jin Thai, and particular shout out to the boat noodles. I walk around this ward a lot, sometimes in inclement weather, and the boat noodles get me through those really hard canvassing shifts when the weather is really disgusting. So love Jin Thai.
We're big on supporting local business, and the local restaurant industry really had it handed to them during the lockdown.
Sure
and they need as much support as we can possibly give them.
Let's shift into another really important. I don't want to keep you on here all night, although you can stay as long as you want. But like to hear some of your thoughts on police reform. Reform, not defund.
Yeah,
there was a horrible phrase that activists used. Defund. It should have been reallocate, because that's what it's really about. But I would let two of the points that we always bring up here is that we don't understand why the mayor or the city council doesn't push or demand that police officers serve in the neighborhoods in which they live, so that they're not looking at the people they're policing as potential enemies and threats to their lives, but as neighbors that they're in collaboration with to help keep the community safe. And the idea of us constantly paying out, basically covering their mess with lawsuit payouts all the time, lawsuit settlements all the time, instead of either them carrying insurance like medical doctors or attorneys or any other profession, or it comes out of their pensions for the mistakes, because the constant bailing out of the police department with tax dollars doesn't hold them accountable, and all it does is enable the constant abuse of power within the ranks. And we're not anti-cop here, and I've said this a million times. I respect the ideals of what law enforcement is supposed to stand for, which sadly CPD, the Fraternal Order Police, don't seem to give a shit about, to be quite frank. So I'd like to hear some of your thoughts on police reform, specifically as it relates to a lot of the scandals and problems we've seen here in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, I think your point about the payouts and the public funds that go to cover misconduct is a really salient one, and that's a thing that does stand in the way of good quality reform. I spent most of 2020 in the streets, like a lot of people did, and a lot of it was fighting for the CPAC ordinance, which was the Chicago Police Accountability Council that eventually merged with the other ordinance to create ECPS. The acronyms are just sidebar. The acronyms are too much, but we have the Empowering Communities for Public Safety, and what that has done is create new police district councils of elected oversight bodies. And I'm excited to work with those elected oversight bodies, because I think it's really critical that we're establishing that oversight to make sure that we're holding our officers accountable for misconduct and really having an honest conversation about what that might look like from a day-to-day perspective. And I think the thing that's so frustrating sometimes, if I can be honest, about the defund squabbles, is that when we need to really remember what we actually have defunded in Chicago, right? Housing and public education.
Mental health
is
a big way to prevent the crime also, which has been that's what's been defunded.
Yeah. And quite literally streets and sanitation too. So we have like necessary infrastructure programs and necessary public health programs and social service programs that aren't receiving the support that they need. And then when we do get actual money allocated in a city budget to hire public mental health professionals like we did last year, the city can't hire them fast enough, right? So that's a problem too. We had 30, I think the number is 31 allocated positions in the 2021 budget. And as of this year's budget hearings, only 7 had been hired. And that's really frustrating. And this, to call back, this is a point of agreement that I have with Harry Osterman, because he has publicly said, hey, look, we really need to be hiring these positions because the money is there, but we are running out of time.
Yeah.
The people of this ward and other wards do not have time to wait for housing and mental health or harm reduction services. And the posting of jobs is a major concern, and something that I'm really committed to as an alder person is better advertising those jobs when they do become available. So that's kind of how I think. I know I got a little bit off topic, but
no, they're all interlinked. Kit, do you have any questions in this direction?
No, I think that you guys are handling it perfectly well. I mean, if anything, I would add, when it comes down to, and again, we're talking about police brutality and police corruption and so much more, right? That's more or less where we're going.
Yeah.
So what I would have to address in here is that, in 2018, we did a coverage with the Exoneration Project where 16 Black men were exonerated for crimes that they did not commit. And the thing is, yes, that was 2018. Many years from now, or many years ago, knowing how crazy 2020 was, it almost seemed like 100 years going through that year alone. But the problem is that we were only still scratching the surface. So there are still people in Cook County Prison right now that are behind bars for crimes that they probably did not commit.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about justice reform, there are individuals that are in jail for stuff that is, again, they didn't do.
Yeah.
And it's going to have to be done by a case-by-case basis. So what are you prepared to do to really bring that to the attention to the city council and to the potential new mayor? Heaven forbid it's Lightfoot.
What are you prepared to do?
Yeah. Well, to your point, sometimes we focus.
I'll be the bad guy.
I mean,
Not a bad guy.
Sometimes we focus so much on some of the day-to-day interactions that we see that get recorded, that get broadcast, that are just horrifying, but then also focus on the interdepartment malfeasance or silly stories like the recent one of a officer vacationing in Florida and publicly urinating or something that I saw pass my feed. But we aren't fully thinking about the larger system that does include the Cook County Jail, right? Where we do have folks who have been accused of crimes that are in many ways they're very low level, that just get passed through a judge in 7 or 8 seconds because the public defender's office is over capacity. And so we've got that kind of system-wide issue that we also need to work on. And that's, again, working with the Cook County commissioners on that as well, because the jail is their purview too. And I think that's what's been, quite frankly, I'm encouraged to see that the full Pretrial Fairness Act passed, because there was a lot of fear mongering about what that would do. And it's it's really common sense reform. And so I think we continue to need those reforms that really establish, better systems in our both in our streets and with regards to the actual judicial systems like the Cook County Jail.
Hyper focusing again on local issues that would absolutely be under your, I guess, your guidance in your ward and your housing platform. You mentioned strengthening legislation that preserves housing for low-income renters and provides permanent affordable housing for people experiencing homelessness. I'm sick and tired of the tents across the city, especially along the north side in the parks, under the viaduct, under the bridges. This is something that is an epidemic. Yeah. So, and I'm heartened to see that this is a focus in your priorities. My question regarding that is, since it is a very localized type of issue, when you're dealing with homeless people in your ward, when you say strengthen legislation that preserves housing for low-income renters and provide permanent affordable housing for people experiencing homelessness, what does that involve? I mean, obviously an alliance with other alder people in other wards. What kind of because we just saw a couple weeks back, Alderperson Haddon and a bunch of progressive aldermen were trying to get a referendum on next February's ballot that would increase some taxation on like the highest minimum amount of like really expensive property owners in the city. And of course, there's I call it the hall of shame of the alder people who did not show up to prevent that vote from actually being allowed to happen. So how do you see being able to put some teeth into strengthening legislation to protect our most vulnerable Chicagoans, the homeless, as we're seeing, as we're getting ready for this really cold winter, Nick? It breaks my heart. Knowing there's so much vacant housing, vacant buildings across the city that no money's going into to maybe retrofit, that's just sitting there empty when we've got people who are freezing and don't have. I mean, they also need the mental health support. That's certainly a component as well. But let me shut up and let you speak to.
No, that's great. I'm glad you brought that up. So I was referencing that ordinance, Bring Chicago Home, that Maria Haddon and others were pushing for, and it's really unfortunate that they, that there were certain mayoral allies who prevented that. And ultimately, like when we talk about the next year of Chicago politics, there is a part of it where it just does become a numbers game. We have to be honest there. Sometimes we're going to need just numbers to get what we want passed, or at least to a referendum on the ballot. Another part that Bring Chicago Home would be addressing supportive housing and those social programs. So kind of what are commonly referred to as wraparound services, public mental health, harm reduction for drug addiction. And then the other piece of that in terms of preservation is pretty multifaceted. So, there's the single room occupancy hotels that are fast disappearing here in Chicago. We want to make sure we're able to preserve those, whether it's, providing opportunities for those building owners to strengthen those buildings.
There was an Airbnb initiative also recently introduced.
And that's another one.
We talked about a few shows back, yeah.
The Airbnb initiative is one. Here in the 48th Ward, we have historic 2 flats and 3 flats that also represent naturally occurring affordable housing. And I've seen deconversion fee plans happen in the 1st Ward and the 35th Ward with Daniel Espada and Carlos Miras Rosa. And I'd love to, look at how we might pursue something like that to make sure that those 2 and 3 flats that house anywhere from 2 to 3 families don't become places that only house 1 family. Right. And that also, pardon?
Or sit empty.
And that's partially where we're constrained as well. I think it does have to be multifaceted. It might have to get experimental. I will say that I think there's a little bit of, it's like a little bit of rancor for maybe rancor is not the right word, but there's something for the tiny homes proposal. And I think
we talked about that Tuesday. It's like, those are like lawn sheds.
But everything has to be on the table, and I think that's where I think about it is like the constant need to experiment through policy and initiatives and strategies, and not get so. And another thing is we don't want to get so bogged down in not being able to responsibly build more housing. we know that aldermen's big job is approving zoning changes, and that requires a community process, which I'm really excited about doing so with transparency and accountability. But it also means that, I am really focused on making sure that when we're building new units, we want to prioritize affordability for families. We want to expand the affordability where possible. We want to build those units on site so we're not continuing to, entrench segregation of the city. And so that's something I'm thinking about as well as my office works with developers to make sure that we're providing the necessary units. Because right now, what the figure that I've seen is that Chicago is going to be about 120,000 housing units behind schedule just this year. And that's far too many and creates far too many circumstances for folks to be living in tents along the lakefront.
When I see one of the candidates, Andre Peliquin, has the background in real estate, immediately my mind goes to, gentrification opportunity, the same way Kappelman did with his cronies. I think Kappelman in the 49th ward, I believe.
46th.
46. Yeah. So, I think that we need to have, personally, my opinion is we need to have an alderperson representing the ward that is less connected with real estate ties and more focused on how do I figure out how to protect so many of the vulnerable people that don't have a voice, that aren't connected with the money of the developers and, all of the internal politics and cronyism that is associated with that. I want to open up, unless I don't, Kit and Ed, if you have any other questions, I do want to also see if there are any questions from our viewers in the live chat before,
there's a
we allow,
ones.
we take the spotlight off of Nick, the interrogation here. Anybody in the live chat that wants to share some questions, please go ahead and type them. Kit and Ed, do you have any other follow-ups?
My only follow-up would be, what's your favorite style of Chicago pizza? And there is no wrong answer.
It seems like there probably is a wrong answer, but I'm going to go with tavern style. I'm tavern style.
Your tavern style? That's a good answer.
Tavern style guy.
Okay, very good. All right, my question, my question real quick.
Okay.
All right, this is the big one. Sox or Cub?
Oh, I'm going to get in so much trouble here. Okay, so here's the thing. Folks. I am from suburban Detroit. But, but very important qualification. I am old enough to remember when the American League only had 2 divisions, and the White Sox and the Tigers were not rivals in those divisions. The Tigers' rival was Cleveland, and the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Blue Jays. I will also say, because she's sitting right across from me, my partner will be very mad if I don't say White Sox because she loves the White Sox.
Brilliant!
For alderman on the north side of
Chicago. Brilliant!
Okay, we have an important question from the live chat, and it's a serious one. I've actually weighed in on this myself, and I'll share what I think after we ask Nick what he thinks.
Can I submit this first, though, Jerry?
All right. Well, I've taken Kathy's question off twice now, so go ahead.
It is okay to support both baseball teams in the city of Chicago.
Thank you.
When I was a youth of a much younger age, there wasn't this super polarized north-south rivalry like there exists today. And so my family would take me to the Cubs games and the Sox games. And we didn't have a problem with that. Yeah. And our ambassador was Harry Carey in both locations.
Yeah, that's true.
So if Harry was okay with being in both locations, I think the rest of both.
And
I think the rest of the city can be. And
I grew up watching Cubs games on WGN because my aunt, before there was a team in Phoenix, my aunt was a huge Cubs fan. And so, like Steve Stone, like Cubs and Sox, still listen to him, right? And so that's meaningful for me. Am I getting the dibs question? Is that
you are?
You are going to get the dibs question, but I'm just going to say that if you are going to be the alderman of the 48th ward, you are technically on the north side, and you're going to have to show some love to the Cubbies.
Of course. Of course I have to show some love to the Cubs.
That doesn't mean you can't also still support the White Sox.
All right,
Yeah,
so we
the
got your
dibs
feature.
question.
All right.
You know, yeah, I mean, we all have opinions on this. Actually, very differing opinions. So, I mean, again, I think with this, I don't think there's a right or wrong. It's certainly very subjective to a person's thoughts on whether or not they feel shoveling out a space and allowing other people to use it is, sharing with the community, or if it really is your God-given right to hold on to something that you shovel out, even though it's a public street. So, Nick, how do you feel about dibs?
Look, I'm gonna be the most politician I could possibly be on this one. I think that I love the history and respect the lineage of Chicago that existed long before I arrived. I think that if somebody goes through the trouble, if a working class person shovels their car out of 12 feet of snow because they have to get to work and they work very, very long hours, I think they should be allowed to put a plastic cone in the street to create, some space for them to get back home if they get back home late at night. What I do not support is when there's a half inch of snow and somebody does preemptive dibs before they get home. Like they have a family member do like a preemptive dibs for the preemptive.
Very, very diplomatic. You are learning how to be a politician.
Well done.
Well done.
Yeah. I think that's one of the few questions that you can actually get a pass for doing a politician answer for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because that is a polarized issue as well,
Yeah.
and a lot of it is just it just depends on the rest of you and your neighbors on how you feel about that situation.
My whole
Because
opinion,
yeah.
Go ahead, Ed.
Because a lot of time, I mean, if you're going to have like one of those overnights where you get like a foot of snow and all the neighbors come out to start shoveling out, either the parking spaces or the back alley or whatever, it should be a community effort there.
I think so. Yeah. The solution is everybody coming out and shoveling out a spot. That way, when you get back, you don't have to say that's mine. I look at it this way, Nick, for what it's worth. It's good exercise. Once I'm gone, if somebody else needs that spot while I'm gone, they can have it, because hopefully one of my neighbors will have also dug out a spot so that the entire street is dug out for everybody to just a public street is all dug out so people can return and have a spot if they don't have a garage. But that's just
if you're able to, dig out the spot next to you.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. Especially if you got a snowblower.
I think that's right. Look, the another real answer and something that I'm interested in is creating more public community spaces, right? And this is part of that, coming out and helping out your neighbors and doing something together with people. It also you get to know your neighbors if you don't already, and that creates community safety too. Mm-hmm. So not to always take it back to a platform piece, but I think that's part of it. And that's what's really fun about this.
My neighbor to the north of me, whenever he does his lawn, and he's got less of a lawn than I do in front, I'm in a 2-flat. Without me asking, he does my front lawn. I mean, he knows it's a little tough for me because I'm disabled. I'm an amputee with a prosthetic limb, and I never ask him. And I buy him like a 6-pack of Modelo, because I appreciate it. And when winter comes, for some reason, it seems easier for me to get my snowblower out. I will do my sidewalk all the way to the alley for people who are coming from the grocery stores, and to my neighbor to the north for helping me out in the summer with the lawnmower. So I do think that, when you realize it's not just about ourselves, it's about helping each other. Because I know there are some seniors who live on my street that I don't want to see slip on the ice.
Yep.
And if I've got the snowblower and I can do it, I'm happy to get the exercise when I've got my limb on. Let's think less about just serving ourselves and more about trying to figure out how to serve each other.
Yeah. Well, this was a great conversation.
Yeah.
It looks like you have some really some dense topics to get to here. I saw Ricky Hendon bribe on the.
We do, and I don't want to.
I am not weighing in on that one, y'all.
Yeah, we're gonna have some fun with the future stories. But listen, tell your aldermanic, your aldermanic candidate allies that you are aligned with. To please look at us and hopefully come on the show and join us as you have, because we've got a few other candidates lined up we're going to talk to, but this is the fun part of the show, is actually being able to present the candidates and personalities that could make some change and provide the solutions that we're bitching about all the time, because we're blue in the face with bitching about stuff. So it was a pleasure to look at your platform and your priorities on your website and be able to open up a conversation here and talk about it.
Yeah, I'm really appreciative. This was very fun, and thank you all for your questions and for all that you do. Just kind of activating, space and time for us to come together and talk about these critical issues. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Nick.
Tuning in again. Have a good rest of your night.
You too. Take
Take
care,
care.
and we will pay close attention to your campaign.
Appreciate it.
Well
Take
done.
care.